Yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin granted citizenship to Edward Snowden, the former National Security Agency contractor who blew the whistle on the mass surveillance of Americans' phone records. Snowden fled to Russia back in 2013 and is still wanted by Washington on charges of espionage. State Department spokesman Ned Price reacted to the news. Let's watch.
Our position has not changed. Mr. Snowden should return to the United States, where he should face justice as any other American citizen would. Perhaps the only thing that has changed is that as a result of his Russian citizenship, apparently now he may well be conscripted to fight in Russia's war in Ukraine.
I think that's a pretty obnoxious talking point. I doubt that Russia is going to conscript Edward Snowden. First of all,
he doesn't qualify because you have to have had prior military service in Russia.
Look, and I'm totally against conscription. I mean, I was against the U.S. draft, et cetera. Russia should not be doing this. What Russia is doing is monstrous, et cetera. We have that set aside now. But the only reason Snowden is in Russia is because he could face criminal charges here stemming from his whistleblowing, stemming from informing the American people and the world that the government was lying about its mass surveillance program. So if we don't want him to be in Russia or being treated favorably by the Russian government, or we view Russia as bad, and we should because Russia is bad and the things they're doing are illiberal and wrong, then we should welcome Snowden back to the U.S. We should have tried to get him back here by offering him a blanket pardon and then giving him like a Medal of Honor for revealing the crimes of our government.
Right.
So the harm is the U.S. put him in this situation.
Yeah, it's interesting that the framing from liberals and the administration figures and the State Department figures seems to be, oh, this is proof that he was a traitor. This is proof that he is a bad actor because he wants to ally with Russia, completely ignoring the fact that he applied for dual citizenship in 2020 and has said after he received permanent residency that year that he and his wife would, quote, remain Americans, raising our son with all the values of the America we love, including the freedom to speak his mind. So he's making his own political statement here, obviously, to say, to your point, I don't want to not be an American. I don't want to not live in America. But what does it say that my own country is treating me more illiberally than a country that can be rightly criticized for its infringements on speech like Russia? Now, obviously, Russia has its own political game that they're playing here and kind of performatively welcoming Snowden to make itself look more liberal than America. But why is America enabling that effort?
Right. We could easily short circuit that effort.
Right.
It would be the easiest thing in the world to say he will not face criminal charges. He is pardoned. What he did was correct, and more people who work for the government should come forward if they uncover wrongdoing. And it is funny. I saw Matt Gaetz tweeted, for instance, pardon Snowden. It's been fascinating to see the transformation of so many Republicans or even conservative pundits were so aghast at things that Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning had done years ago, and now perceive and have watched and have real grievances in some cases about how law enforcement, the FBI and national intelligence agencies have sort of shifted during the Trump years and now are anti-Trump and have done some of those violations of due process and now understand. Meanwhile, some Democrats, not all, there's still very good people on the left, but some of the more mainstream Democrats have become more deferential to law enforcement because they perceive law enforcement to be anti-Trump.
What a way to fumble the bag for Democrats. This should be their issue.
Meanwhile, Snowden himself said on Twitter, quote, after years of separation from our parents, my wife and I, no desire to be separated from our sons. After 2 years of waiting and nearly 10 years of exile, a little stability will make a difference for my family. I pray for privacy for them and for us all.
Some of our friends are sharing their thoughts on the matter. Narrowing in on the Post reporting, journalist Matt Taibbi said, I guess we're rewriting history of the story to merely be an intelligence leak and not of the disclosure of a massive illegal surveillance program. Thanks, Washington Post. Glenn Greenwald accused the Washington Post of maligning Snowden. Once an important source to the Post, Glenn said, it's extra weird for the Washington Post of all papers to do this since they congratulated themselves for sharing in the 2014 Pulitzer Prize for having published hundreds of Snowden's documents.
Incredible. Glenn also reminded followers of the story that the U.S. repeatedly ruled the programs Snowden disclosed to readers were unconstitutional and illegal violations of Americans' privacy rights.
Yeah, it's important to emphasize that because that can get lost in all of these stories about, whistleblowers' so-called Espionage Act, people being prosecuted under the Espionage Act, that the fundamental leaks that they have, that they enabled were so central to our contemporary understanding of how illegally the U.S. state operates against the interests of its own citizens. And sometimes the stories, I think there's been an active effort to make a lot of these stories about the individuals as opposed to what they did. And I think that people like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald are right to not allow us to get away with that kind of revisionist history.
Now, what is the actual status of his family? You were just looking that up before we started talking. What does that, because his wife and his children are with him currently,
Yeah.
So
apparently, he already has permanent residency in Russia, and the Times at least reports that this is a practical measure to give his family greater freedom crossing borders. So, there have been some trips that he's taken to other countries, I guess, where there's not the same risk of extradition. And being a citizen, I suppose, makes it easier for him to travel at the very least.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to stay tuned about whether he's heading off to Ukraine. That's obviously not going to happen, but that was our own State Department's framing of the issue. We'll have more Rising right after this. As always, stay with us.